Today on Make Break, I have with me Robert Stahl with his latest collection of stories, Show Me Where It Hurts. And man, I am most of the way through. I promised myself I would be done. That's it. That's the one. I love
These are
it.
not my teeth. I just have to say. See,
Okay.
I like to prove that to
So
people.
it's actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask right off the hop for the cover. What was the inspiration behind that?
Oh, sure, that's a good question. So I wanted something that was just iconic, and simple. I see a lot of covers that are just kind of cluttered and your eye doesn't know where to go, and I just wanted something that was super memorable. Funnily enough, this is a short story collection, and I found that once I'd collected all the stories together, I knew I wanted to call it "Show Me Where It Hurts." I just fell in love with that title, except I didn't have any stories that said anything about "Show Me Where It Hurts." Nothing was titled that. None of the characters said those words, and I wanted something that thematically tied it together. So I dabble in poetry, and so I came up with a poem, which is basically kind of the central theme of this collection. And just a simple little poem I wrote. It was sort of a way to exercise some kind of bad feelings I'd had in the past. And I found at the very end of that poem, although I hadn't set out for this when I started, there was a kind of monstrous character at the end waiting. And this is sort of what I imagined that monstrous character looking like. So it sort of ties together the whole collection.
Nice. Well, I have to ask the next question then, because these you're getting to all my whole bingo card really efficiently here. Um, I wanted to ask about where you would actually you because you've won several competitions, short story competitions, or at least have entered into them. Tell me more about that experience in the past. Like, how many have you done, and which ones have you submitted to?
Sure. So I didn't start writing until a little bit later in life. I had some just personal problems in the way, some mental blocks that wouldn't let me start. So I started writing fiction pretty much just as a way to kind of reset my head and deal with some of these traumas from the past. I wrote for about 5 years before I got any traction at all. And so that was 5 years of writing stories and sending them out and just not getting any interest. And finally, I started to sell a few here and there. And so I just kept at it and kept at it. And before I knew that, I had a whole collection on my hands. I can't say I've won any awards or anything, but I have sold stories to markets where there's been lots of competition, to several pro markets. So that I'm pretty proud of. But it's always a struggle. I mean, I still get rejections all the time. I got one yesterday that broke my heart. And it's just a matter of keeping your nose to the grindstone and just, hoping for the best and trying to do the best work that you can do.
Keep making even when you feel like it's breaking your spirit. Sorry to go tie it back to the thematic.
Yes, you keep making the work even when you feel broken. So yes,
Yeah.
it all ties together.
I that so I love the success of even getting a story bought is something that even I haven't had the success of, and I get to live vicariously through you, that feeling of like pride that like yeah, I wow, like having currency exchanged for a good that I have created, a story that I've told. Wow. And that's something that I want to like really emphasize because that is such a rarity in today's society, industry, world, etc. Um, and we're of the ones that you have submitted to. Like, what's the one you're most proud of? Which publication was it published at?
Let's see. There's a market called Story Unlikely that's pretty tough to get into. And I have actually, it's a political horror story, which I don't do political stuff, but I felt compelled to deal with some political frustrations, I'll just say, a few years ago. And so I dealt with those feelings in the form of a short story. So um, I ended up placing, I think they said my story came in the top six. And this is out of, I want to say, almost 1,000 entries. So that
What?
one
That's
is
nuts. Wow.
pretty dear to my heart. That doesn't happen super often, but it did happen, and it gives me hopes that it could happen again. So I'm very proud of that one. Yeah, I'll stick with that one for now.
What was the name of that short story that you submitted?
That one it's in the collection. It's called A Very Stable Zombie.
A very stable zombie. And I actually, speaking of like the content of your stories, I was actually, it's really interesting talking to you now because I noticed right away you're a fan of some capes. Um, it's yeah, no, all sorts. And it's actually funny because when I was reading the very first story, um, and of course this is the moment I blank out on the name of it, but it is the one where a man loses his wife to the soil, the mud. When I was reading it, I could not help think of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, specifically his descriptions and his retrofitting the character from what it originally was into this avatar of the green. And I wondered whether that had any basis in reality. And now I'm thinking chances are pretty good that you might have read some Swamp Thing back in the day. Is that right?
Yes, that's a very good call. I think you're the first person that's read the story that's made that connection. So I'm very proud of you. I'm a
Thank you.
huge Alan Moore fan. I've got several pieces of his work back here behind me. His short story collection that came out 2 years ago is fantastic. So I'm a slobbering fan of Alan Moore, and in particular his work on Swamp Thing. As a young comic book reader, it just blew me away. It was the first time I'd ever seen comic books merged with literature. It was just absolutely heavenly. So Swamp Thing has always been one of my favorite characters, and so when it came time for this man to meet his reincarnated wife, it just seemed kind of like a natural um, thing for her to be, was this type of creature. And I also lean into another trope in that story. It's the classic tale of the monkey's paw.
Yep.
So that's actually the
100%.
mechanism with which this wife becomes reincarnated. So it's got two little devices that I've used from the past, so Swamp Thing and the monkey's paw. So yeah, good call on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I did note that it was a spot of like genre awareness as well as like kind of just like hanging a lampshade on it. Like, yeah, that's precisely what it is. And I thought it was the ending without ruining anything was just suitably devastating and love. It's so hard to kill our darlings, and yet that's the first thing that Vonnegut always says is you gotta do nasty shit to these people. Like you gotta you gotta make it. There's got to be some form of of not just conflict, but like it has to matter. It has to be there has to be a cost to everything. And I wonder what's been the hardest cost you've had to pay, or have had one of your characters pay out of all of them. Which whose fate has been the most unfortunate? Let's say.
So in my stories, the characters, there's so many to think about right now, and I'm kind of stumping on that. But with me personally, with my career personally, the cost has been, uh, not hanging out with friends when you need to be working. So kind of the loss of a bit of your social life. There's the endless spate of rejections. There's constant feelings of self doubt, just that nagging voice that's like, am I good enough? Am I as good as everybody else? That thing that's a demon that I fight almost on a daily basis. So, yeah, it's writing has not come without its cost to me. However, I attribute my explorations in writing as basically having saved my life. As I mentioned earlier, I went through a really dark phase, which I won't go into too much, but uh, writing gave me a way to kind of deal with these demons on the page, and wrap my head around some issues, and also just to use up some time that I was using doing some things that were not so great for me. So, in a way, writing's been a curse, and in a way, it's been my salvation.
Funny how it can be both at the same time, eh?
Sure.
I uh I wonder what part of the so getting in the process of getting this published, what was your journey like throughout that? Because nowadays it seems like it's just such a carnival of the macabre when it comes to people, creatives in particular, trying to make it or to break through. And a lot of my show, in fact, you're the first writer on this show, and yet I'm a writer primarily. And I've talked ad nauseum about like how the music industry is a nightmare. It is also true that the writing and publishing industries not particularly let's say healthy either. But I wonder, like your own experience of moving through from beginning the writing to actually like getting that work successfully published and then moving on to publish your own short story collection. It's that part that I'm wondering, from that stretch from getting them published in other publications to printing your own book. I wonder what that process was like for you.
Sure. So the process of publishing the stories that are in this collection, it took probably over 10 years, and it was slow work. It was lots of rejections. If you saw the ratio of my rejections to my acceptances, it's staggering. Like it's almost 10 to 1, you know. So it takes a lot of fortitude just to stay in the game and just to keep at it when you're getting so many no's. But that said, once I had enough stories under my belt, I knew I could gather them into a collection. I threw in a couple of other ones that have not been published yet. And then I began shopping the collection out. So at the time I was sending the collection out and getting it together, I was going through a pretty traumatic period also. My life is full of trauma. What can I say? But my mother was dying of dementia. So she'd been diagnosed and she was kind of in her latter days. So I'd found that I couldn't really create anything new. I was so stressed out all the time and just spending a lot of time with her. So I used that time to gather these stories together, to edit, and to start sending them out to possible publishers. And that wasn't easy. That took about a year of rejections in its own way. You know, and some rejections are easier than others. Some write you and they're a little more cold than others. And, you know, it's heartbreaking. But I finally found the perfect publisher with JournalStone, which is a fantastic independent publisher. And I couldn't be happier. So it's all about just, you know, doing the waiting game and just making connections and finding that perfect fit.
I think there's something to the resilience of this that I don't know. I really do think that is what separates a pro and an amateur, is the willingness to play. I've been both musician and a writer, and writing was always the constant. I haven't played music in 10 years, so but I would always take every opportunity to play. Didn't matter if it was to 200 people or two people. And if you think I'm being facetious about that number of two, you would be incorrect, because I have. And funny enough, that was that very same thing that I'm referring to, that show, to two people. It's the same one where I drew blood. Okay, so it's it's I'll play this. I think that, I mean, I sound immodest, but I'm trying to, you know, align with what I'm seeing in yourself, which is I will put the literal blood, sweat, and tears into the thing, and with no reward. That's fine, because as one of the characters in Heat says, the action is the juice. And for me, it's true. The action is the juice. That the getting to do that is its own reward, which I realize is a very, maybe it's a pithy platitude. Doesn't matter. Just because a lot of people say it doesn't mean it's not true. Um, so I wonder, like, where does that resilience come from? How do you just keep on showing up and just how do you do the Captain America? Like, I could do this all day. Like, where does that come from for you?
Just sheer dogged determination, stubbornness, um, wanting to prove something to myself that I can do it, and wanting to show other people that I can do it. That's all it is. Um, I have to ask you a question. So this is my horror writer's mind at work. You said you drew blood during a performance. You didn't say whether you drew your blood or one of your two audience members' blood, and I just have to know because it,
It
it
was
might end
mine.
up in a story.
Yeah, well, it was mine for sure. It's funny. I've actually, yeah, it was my own. Caught a, guitar right here.
Ooh,
Wasn't mine. I was just banging about, but yeah, that opened right up, and there's a picture of me with just it's right down that way. Funny enough, it was
that should be the album
Halloween.
cover.
It should have been, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, waste not, want not, but we wasted that opportunity for sure. It was definitely used on our socials, but yeah, that was definitely one of those things where it's funny because it was Halloween, and so I kept walking around afterwards, and people were like, "Oh, nice costume," and I'm like, "This is real. This is my blood." And
yeah,
they're like, "Yeah, mm-hmm." And I'm like,
awesome.
"I need medical attention."
Sure.
um, I that when it comes to the returning to the work, I feel like the only things that have really acted as a support in that pursuit have been other writers who have written about writing. So what I mean is like Stephen King's On Writing, Pressfield's War of Art,
Mm.
and surprisingly for me, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. Don't know if you've read it or are a fan, but I know. So it comes out of left field for people. Usually, when I say Elizabeth Gilbert, they're like, "Isn't that the Eat, Pray, Love lady?" And I go, "It
Yeah.
is. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm writing
I've
it
never
down
read
right
it.
now because I live for
Yeah,
stuff like this. So I've read the other two books. I don't know this one, but I'm gonna check it out.
I. It was 2015. I was going through very tumultuous, like moving countries. I was moving to England with my wife. Um, she was going to med school there, and then I had nothing going on. So I was like, with nothing removed, what is left? It is the writing. So I just dove headfirst. And her book, Gilbert's Big Magic, was the thing that came to me. And as a result, I've listened to it like God 3 times and read it paperback once, like over the years. But I wonder for you, you've just said like, yep, On Writing was one, War of Art. Were there any others? Were there specific writers that you have written about writing that would like to that have made that impact for yourself?
Um, Again, I'm blanking, but I'm glad you brought up the War of Art because that is a book that I think changed my life to a no small degree. And I actually learned about that book through, the comic book writer Jonathan Hickman. Are you aware of
Yes,
him?
East of
Okay.
West. Oh my God,
Yes.
yes, I've got the whole collection right over there.
So I'd been reading his work on Fantastic Four and developed a little writing crush on him. So I started reading everything that I could of his. And in one of the afterwards, or maybe the intro to one of his collections, I think it was one of his independent collections, he mentioned how that book had changed his life. And so I went and found it and I read it. And I was like, what is this little 120-page book? I mean, and it's changing people's lives, but it is that influential as far as, figuring out what's blocking you, what's holding you back. It really did kind of change my trajectory a little bit. Stumbled on that word. So I'm glad you brought that one up because it's a good one.
I love that you mentioned Hickman. I literally, in terms of a voice, a definable voice, I swear to God that East of West. Have you read East of West?
That's one that I have not been able to get into. I've read, I was reading it monthly when it came out, and I think there was just something about how long it took for the issues to come out. And it's a pretty convoluted story with lots of characters.
It is. It's
I
very
wasn't able
dense. Yeah.
I wasn't able to remember or connect what was happening, in the prior issues. So I think I lost interest. However, I did see the collection at a comic book store near the house recently. One of the collections, I think there's several, but it's like this big, and I'm like, oh, Christmas
There's
goals right there. So,
3 hardcovers that I have.
oh
They're like the I always forget because like I don't really know what the it's all termed differently. Like it's not quite as thick as that Invincible one by Kirkman, which is like that size,
yeah,
where it's like what, like 20 trades or something ridiculous. But it's like half of that, so it's a hardcover, and I have the 3 of them, and I can't do monthlies. I just cannot do it. I'm a completionist, and I like to have trades. Um, if for any non-comic readers suddenly their things are about to like get very murky for them, too bad. A trade is 5 issues, okay? Deal with it. uh yeah, I've always been a trade guy, because I can't just have one issue. It's like, here's a beer. Oh, you're halfway done. That's it. That's all you get. It would be like, what was the point? You know what I mean?
absolutely.
That tells you my unhealthy attitudes toward beer. My God, I'm 11 years sober.
Oh,
um,
excellent.
no, I. Oh, cheers, thank you. But so with Hickman, what other comic book writers specifically are you? We've covered more. We've covered Hickman. Are there any other comic writers that you're massively influenced by, or at least have some influence?
Yeah, I would say those two. I'm also a huge fan of. It's not PC to say this these days, but Neil Gaiman.
Diamond, yeah.
His work on Sandman is absolutely legendary and beautiful.
Yep.
And I find myself like, I just think about those stories over and over again. So Swamp Thing, Sandman, Hickman's run on Fantastic Four, those are all top notch.
It's so
I
hard
think
to.
anything Alan Moore does is gold to me. I'm just infatuated with him.
Yeah, he's such a dense writer as well. Like, it's funny how I can just like fly through every other comic, but whenever it's a Moore comic, I can be stuck on the same. I can be holding the same thing for quite some time. I
Yeah.
wonder, did you ever read his like straightforward, like he wrote a fiction novel actually, called Jerusalem. Did you ever happen to read that one?
No, I've not read Jerusalem or The Voice of the Fire. I actually had a copy of The Voice of the Fire about 20 years ago when it came out, and I could not get past the first chapter because he writes this character. I think it's a neo-monolithic. What's the time frame? I can't remember, but it's a primitive character who's also like mentally challenged, and so he writes this whole first section in this character's voice, and I could not wrap into it. But this was
Right,
20
right.
something years ago when I was a much different person. I was in the throes of my darkness. And I mean, I wasn't taking life seriously. So I just didn't give it the proper attention. I think now, were I to circle back to it, I would be in awe of that book. But the short answer to your question is I haven't read either of those. The only prose of his I've read are his short story collection that I have behind me, which it blew me away. And I've read it twice already. So it's that good.
Right on. That is, and that's fair because actually, Jerusalem, I wouldn't expect most people to. It's a tome. It's massive,
For
and
sure.
like most of his work, pretty ornate and somehow also epic, at the
Yes.
same time. I think it's such an interesting triumvirate of writers that you've mentioned, because there's 2 of the greats. I mean, despite whatever everything that's going on with Gaiman now, or game, I never know if it's he says anyway. That doesn't matter. But Hickman was such a sorry, I'm still like reeling that someone else is out there that appreciates Hickman. It would be like if someone
No
said like,
doubt.
yeah, Warren Ellis. Warren Ellis is like one of my biggest influences,
Warren
and I
Ellis
go,
is great
whoa,
also.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Transmetropolitan,
Grant Morrison also. Now that my brain is
massive.
moving a little better, coffee's kicking in. Grant Morrison is one of my favorites also.
Massive. Yeah, no, that's another classic as well, especially that run on Animal Man. That's the one that everybody remembers in terms of capes. Am I remembering the name of that right? Animal Man? It is
Oh
Animal
yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
right?
you got it. Mhm.
Okay, okay. All right. Sorry, it was years ago. I don't even have the trace, so I just anyway. It's nuts. No, I think that what's interesting is that there's such a strong tradition of horror in graphic novels, and I wonder what in and among that, I mean, Moore is clearly an influence, 100%. But are there any other titles specifically, instead of writers, maybe just titles that come to mind when it comes to horror for yourself that you think about or are influenced by at all?
Sure. When it comes to comics, I think Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol is exceptional. His run on Batman kind of leans into these gothic sensibilities in a lot of ways. Grant Morrison's work on The Invisibles is super great, also. Uh, so mad props to all of them. But I think if we were to talk about just like regular horror fiction, my love right now lies in writers like Stephen Graham Jones, who's turning out to be quite the literary voice in horror right now. He's up and rising and super nice guy. I've studied with him, and he actually, I workshopped that story that we talked about, The Weeds and the Wildness Yet, in one of his classes. It was a week long writing class in Colorado at no other place but the Stanley Hotel, which is where Stephen King got the inspiration to write The Shining. So I was lucky enough to study with Stephen Graham
Oh,
Jones, and he actually workshopped this story with me in class. So he's got a special place in my heart right now. I'm also a big fan of Jack Ketchum. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff. He's really, really
I
great.
haven't, but I know precisely some of the story. I still have at least three titles of his on my TBR, and actually Graham Jones as well. I still also have. I cannot wait to finally pick up my copy of The Only Good Indians, which is. It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm literally ordered that
Awesome.
through my local, and Ketchum. Ketchum is is still in line. I've been really doubling down on my efforts to like consume, because well, we'll get to that question in a second, but you've mentioned two amazing forces in horror, both contemporary and from. I think Ketchum's a lot more. This is a bad habit, but I'm like searching it right now, seeing when his like when the majority of his work was sort of around.
Yeah, he was,
Um,
I think, 90s, 2000. He unfortunately died maybe 4 years ago on my freaking birthday. He died. And
oh man,
I'd only discovered him like 3 or 4 years before. So I was all of a sudden like feeding all the Jack Ketchum into my mouth, just trying to get as much of it into my system
uh,
as I can because, man, he is intense. He creates these characters you instantly fall for and then throws them into the worst, and I mean worst situations you could ever imagine. It's harrowing. I'm getting I'm getting bumps on my arms just thinking about some of his writing. He's that good.
wow,
So definitely bump him
wow.
up on your list a little bit.
Okay, 100%. I definitely want to. It's one of those luminary names that shows up so often in terms of my pursuit of like. I'll be honest. I recently was searching most disturbing books on TikTok, and it has so far has not disappointed. But I am in search of something to really like. I read Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk like 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and I think I'm still chasing that dragon. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I'm still
Mhm.
still chasing that feeling of absolute honest to God repulsion. I actually read it again recently and I was like, yeah, still has some staying power.
That's the one
It's
with guts in it, right?
yep,
The story
yep.
Guts. Oh my god, that is one of my all-time favorite horror stories, and I don't think people give Chuck Palahniuk enough credit for writing horror, but that story is full on horror, and
Mhm.
actually like turned my stomach when I read it. It's harrowing.
It really is. And it's the
Yeah,
kind of thing that I mean it is I mean we talk about body horror a lot in well, we talk.
yeah.
I guess I would love
You
to
and I do.
get your take on body yeah.
Sure.
I would love to get your take on body horror. But yeah, Polonic is the way that he couches it in this, like, you know, behind the white picket fences and the nice lawns, there's this hidden in plain sight type of society that you just aren't privy to. That if I think of any other type of way of medium or what have you that was even remotely similar, the best I can come up with is Lynch's Blue Velvet, where there's
Mhm.
like these nice little box houses and whatnot, but behind it, there's
Mhm.
this hideous, horrifying character played by the inimitable Dennis Hopper. Um, and it's that type of thing that I love. And you're right. People don't, I think that people rag on Poloniak, I find these days, because I think that he's cornered that story and has not deviated from that. And
Mhm.
I feel like, so what? Personally, that's always been my take of like, I don't know that somebody, it's because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Sure.
Because if you nail something to the point that like not one but two film adaptations have happened off the back of your book, has entered the public consciousness and discussion for decades. But if you were to move away from that, it's like any artist, you know, like, oh, they're doing something different, I hate it.
Hmm.
Oh, they're doing the same thing, I do something different. It's like, well, you
Yep.
can't win, so why? Don't worry about them, because them, if you're working for them, you're lost, and that's the difference.
Absolutely.
Is like, I think writers do it for ourselves because there is no room for writing to an audience because they'll sniff it from a million miles away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you never know what's going to react with a certain group, what people are going to like. I've had stories that I've poured my heart into that I think are amazing that people don't react to, and people have really liked stories that I don't care that much about. I mean, it's a mixed bag. Not that I don't care about my stories, but you know what I mean. So,
I do. Um, we're getting through some heavyweights here. Who else has been turning your eye when it comes to horror these days?
I really like a lot of work that Grady Hendrix is coming out with. He's kind of a new up
Hmm.
and coming horror writer. He tends to write, it's not super scary stuff, but it's good characters and there's a lot of humor. He wrote a book called My Best Friend's Exorcism, which was turned into a Netflix film. So I enjoy him. I enjoy Richard Thomas also. He's a writing instructor that I've studied with, but he's got several books out. He's got a very singular style. It's very, I want to say, dense isn't the right word because dense is negative. It's very rich and lush, and creates these
Hmm.
beautiful tapestries on the page. And I'm a big fan of like classics like Clive Barker to me. I could sit down and read some books of blood like all day long and just love my life that day. So,
Nice. I still have yet to sink my teeth in.
oh my
Um,
God,
I'm trying to make it. I
I'm going to
know.
give
I'm
you a
trying to make
list.
up for lost time. I know. Well, I would actually love that. If you have a Goodreads profile, I will look at your Red and TBR. But
Yes.
actually, what's on your what's something that you've this might be a risky question, but what's a classic that you haven't read that might surprise people to find out that you haven't read?
Let's see. Um, I can't think of anything. When it comes to horror, I try to keep up. Throw a big horror book at me, and we'll see if I've read it. I tend to
Okay.
blink.
All right, no worries. The Shining.
I read The Shining. Yeah, all good on
You
Stephen King.
have.
I'm
Okay.
all chalked up there.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Yeah,
Since this is a disclosure exercise, this is a safe space. So,
sure.
let me be the first to put my hand up and say, believe it or not,
Don't tell me what you're going to tell me.
despite all the
Don't.
I hadn't before starting to listen to Pet Cemetery recently, I had
Hmm.
not actually read any. I know, it's
Yeah.
horrible.
This
It's
interview is over,
horrifying.
Lance.
This
It's been great chatting with you.
it's horrible. I know, and I think it's because I was I had this awful disease, which is that I thought that reading had to be for the longest time I thought that reading had to like better me. It was all like
Yeah.
nonfiction, self-help, all that bullshit, right? So for the longest time I wouldn't read fiction unless it was graphic novels, which anyway. And yet still somehow, but for the longest time I was obsessed with science fiction, and so that was where a lot of my attention went. And so for the longest time, I for some reason I had this block, and you know what? My life is better now because I doubled down on my passion, which is like I want books that are going to alter my brain chemistry for the worse. I genuinely love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe that's the whole point of horror, and that was something that I was going to eventually get to. But let's finish our exercise.
Sure.
I am listening, by the way, now to Pet Cemetery, and it's narrated by Michael C. Hall, who played Dexter, and it's
Oh yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
perfect. So, um, I like audiobooks for longer, for ones that are more established authors, because you do get like really great names for narrators, and they do such a good job. So I'm enjoying it now. I'm fixing the mistakes. Okay,
Yeah.
next will be
Absolutely.
The
Well,
Shining, and then afterwards will be it, and yeah.
yeah, definitely
Um,
The Shining. The
okay,
Shining is like Stephen King, I think, as far as quality, has pits and valleys, and The Shining is stellar. It's good horror literature, I would call it. I think some of his stories are a little more throwaway than others, but that one really shines. I have to point out also
easy
Misery,
expression.
which is yeah, Misery,
Ooh,
which is
yeah.
right there. First book that I ever literally like couldn't stop reading. I think I read it in 2 days, and that had a powerful effect on me as far as wanting to become a writer and wanting to do kind of the things that he did. And then I have to point out one of his stories called it's a novella and it's called The Mist. It's been turned
Ooh.
into a film, and the short story really affected me in my youth, just as far as how visceral and cruel the characters were in that story. Just an amazing piece of work. So I have to point out those three.
Credit where credit's due. That and apparently the movie somehow managed to come up with an even nastier ending than the
Oh,
novella.
yeah, which I'm not always a fan of, but I think the director, I think it was Frank Darabont, really he took liberties with the ending, and I feel like just made it a way more intense than the book. Yeah.
Kind of turned it up a little bit, kind of like
Mhm.
just like King put that knife in there, but then he came along and was like, "How about if we, you know,
Yeah,
it's
it's
nasty
interesting
stuff."
because and I don't know if you haven't read Cujo. I do know you haven't read Cujo, but at the end of Cujo, spoiler alert, everybody, the book's what 40 years old. The kid dies at the end of the book, and it's devastating. It just breaks your heart. But in the film that came out in the 80s, the kid lives. So it's like that story in reverse. Interesting.
Right. It's also interesting that as a condition, because of this, and I say this for the benefit of the audience, but Kubrick, his version of that, his one from one auteur to a different auteur,
Yeah.
the difference in opinion that had. I mean, King walked
Yes.
out of that theater, so his condition, his writer was like, from then on, like whenever there was any movie being made, he was like, no, I need to be involved some way, shape, or form, and that's why he had this little cameos here and there, but it
Yeah.
was to prevent that happening ever again, which is wild to think about because that is literally one of the greatest horror films of all time. But it's interesting to see like the subsequent ones that were adapted, like Thinner. Cujo's an excellent example. I'm sure that there's a whole host of them throughout the 80s and 90s that are just kind of they don't quite reach the heights that a lot of his work I think deserves.
Right.
An exception would be It, that uh, sort of, was it a miniseries? It was like two movie. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. But in more recent years, I think that people have been more fair and more committed to better, more genuinely more terrifying depictions of it. I guess that brings us to movies. I mean, what were some of the what are some of the movies that you kind of have like, if you had to like pick top three horror films of all time, what would you go with?
Top three. Mm, let my brain spin in the background while I say the first one that I would definitely want to be on that list is Hereditary. by Ari Aster.
Wrong.
Have you seen it?
Several times. It is
Awesome.
an absolute. Mm,
It's up there. Yeah,
mhm.
and that is a movie that I didn't realize was scaring me as I watched it. And it wasn't until that night and the next day and the day after that, the more I started thinking about that movie, the more I realized how fucking scary. Can we cuss on the show? How
Yeah,
fucking scary
100%.
it is. Just all of the details hidden in the background, and then he lays it out to where you can't really get a picture of the whole story until afterwards. He gives you a little bit here and a little bit there. And I think the beauty of his direction in that film is that your brain like puts the puzzle together later and you're like, holy shit. And that is why I love that movie. Like he's doing things that other people haven't done in film, and it's stellar. Another great film that I've loved in the past is called The Descent. It's the female
Yep.
cave, the ladies that are on a healing trip. The woman has lost her husband and her child, and they go on a trip into a cave. They're spelunking in a cave, and they meet the cannibals. That one really threw me loop, and that one's pretty old now. But if you like that one, I've got to say, read Jack Ketchum's Off Season, Lance. Do it. Do it this year. You will not be disappointed.
Off season.
Yeah. And then another one
Amazing.
recently that's affected me a lot is a film that came out, I think, last year, Talk to Me.
Ooh, that's by the brothers. What are they?
Yeah, they're the
What's the names?
brothers. I
Yeah,
don't
talk to
know
me.
a whole lot about them yet, but they also just came out with another film called Bring Her Back, which I guess is their
I've yet
second
to see
film that
that
they've
one.
done together. It's exceptional too, but Talk to Me, I think, rises a little bit above the other one. Those guys are going to be around for a while, and I can't wait to see what they do next.
Yeah, it's always fun and exciting to see people that are bringing something like completely new, like both new and also having the same hallmarks that make things really fun, like enjoyable to watch. Like I don't know, it's like you know what you've signed up for,
Mhm.
in some regards, and that's an interesting list though. It's really interesting, like the cross section that you picked. Um, there's psychological, obviously. Um, I do get the sense that there's like the meeting between, the thin realm between the unknown and the known. That's a classic trope in horror. But it's also the psychological. I wonder, we're gonna get a bit more meta with it. We, I think that I know what the appeal is for me with horror. I think that with horror these days, it's so easily reduced to, in people, for fans of not horror, any writers that are not fans of that, or even readers, or even just people in general. I think that there's a place that horror speaks to that any other genre can't possibly. I mean, thrillers are basically the closest, and there's a lot of spillover and crossover between those things. But I wonder, like, why would you say that horror has such a consistent, almost constant place throughout not just our stories, but like our cultures across the world?
That is a very good question. I think it's because horror lets us experience fear in a safe way, and the world is a really scary place. You know, look at all the violence out in the world. I mean, school shootings. It just seems like mankind has a natural tendency to want to kill one another. And I mean, there's a thin, I think, membrane separating that tendency from, a person's normal day to day existence. I think we're all just kind of a hair's trigger away from doing really horrible things. And I think we think about that on a daily basis as we see it in the world. And so maybe horror is so popular because it lets us deal with those fears or emotions or feelings in a safe way. I know when I was young and reading horror, like I knew that I was attracted to like horror comics and horror stories because they scared the shit out of me. And like, it's a very visceral feeling. Like you feel, the hair on the back of your neck stand up and, your armpits might sweat. Your heart's going to increase a little bit. And it's a tangible feeling, right? It makes you feel something. And to me, that there's an allure in that feeling because it's addictive. It's almost like a drug. You want the next bigger dose. The next time you read something, you want a bigger scare. And that certainly happened to me with what I was reading. I started reading things that didn't scare me. And so I had to find writers that, scared me more, which led me to writers like Jack Ketchum, Lance.
I have to, yep. It's already
Yeah.
jumped way up my
Awesome. Good. Hope I'm doing
all of,
my job.
you're doing great work. I mean, all apologies to Karen Slaughter. She's gonna have to wait on this next one. I'm so sorry, but um, I uh pause. I'm not gonna stop the recording. I'm just gonna edit this out. You doing okay for time? I know that I'm conscious that it's like nearly time for you to get Guanin, so I want to be careful and considerate of your time.
Let me check my calendar real fast. I probably got like 5 to 8 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
Is that okay?
And since I'll let, yeah, of course. My God, thank you for indulging me for the time. What I wanted to ask was, in terms of wrapping up and finishing up, do you want to go more into like a broader sense? Because that's what I was kind of going for, is going through you as a writer, you as an appreciator of it, and then kind of getting big with it, or do you want to stick to more of like about the craft itself? So, what would you prefer?
Maybe probably stick with the craft. I feel like if we go big, that's probably philosophical. Philosophically, that's all I have in my bag is that answer about horror and emotions. But you know what?
Great.
It's your show, so I'm down for whatever.
Nah, this is fireside for me. This is a veranda, or if maybe more accurately, let me come back to it. You have taken a lot of time over the years to hone and refine and, uh, you know, edit, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that also separates the amateurs from the pros is the ability and the readiness to edit, whether self-edit or receive or pursue edits. In terms of the editing process, like how do you approach it specifically so that you know that you're creating the best possible thing without getting lost too far in the weeds? How do you make that marker for yourself?
Sure. So the best thing you can do is to get the piece done and be able to let it set for a little while. So sometimes I'm moving so quickly trying to hit this deadline or enter this contest or sell to this magazine that time kind of diminishes. But the best thing you can do as a writer is to have time to let it sit and cool and then come back to it and be objective about it. And, if you can give it 2 or 3 days, um, you come back to it with fresh eyes and some of those errors are going to pop out right at you, right? You read the story and it may not flow as well. It's going to become obvious to you. Whereas if you try to edit it the day you wrote it, you're still in that formative phase and you're not as sharp. So that is key. I think it's important to have a close network of people that you trust that can be your first eyes. And I mean, Stephen King talks about this in On Writing is, have your first readers that you trust that can look at it and be willing to not say, this is the best thing I've ever read every time you give them something. If like they need to be critical, and if they don't like it,
Thank you.
they need to tell you, I don't like this. For some reason, it's not working for me. And you need to be able to be receptive to that. I've come a long way as far as getting feedback like that. It just bounces off my back now. And it used to hurt my feelings, but you get enough rejections under your belt and you get a lot more cold to that sort of thing, Lance. So those things are key. And, it's funny, like I had submitted a short story to a magazine just a few weeks ago, and they wrote back and said, "Hey, we like the story. We're thinking about using it, but would you be willing to revise this section? It's not working for us. And so I said, sure. If it sells the story, I'll consider revising it. And I kind of saw their point in this one section that was not working. And so I rewrote it and resubmitted, and they still didn't take it. Like they took other stories. And that's happened to me a couple times, but I didn't let it really get to me. It's stung for a minute, but you've got to move on. You've just got to keep going. And you just have to realize that there's, unless you're Stephen King or this auteur artist that pops up onto the scene that everybody loves, writings work, and you're going to get a lot of rejections. And the more rejections you get, the more likely you are to get that yes.
Great advice. So from that, I've gleaned, get the writing part done as quick as you can so that you have the time for the cooling. You have your close network of people that you trust. Is it fair to say that third piece of advice is like, don't get too attached to the work that you aren't willing to revise? Would that be a fair way of summarizing that?
I think writers are of two minds in this. I personally am of that mind. I do know some writers who are very resistant to that. They say, like, this is my art and this is the way I want it and this is the way I intended it. And that's a fair argument. I'm trying to sell as many stories as I can in as little time as I can. So I'm maybe a little more receptive to revisions. So the point is, if there's something that you really believe in, that you're convinced about, even if someone tells you they don't like it or it's not working, if you believe in your heart that that story needs that section or piece, then you keep it. And that's part of your artistic integrity, right? So yeah, you just have to walk that fine line of like, no, I know this is right, this stays. Okay, I can see the point that this needs to change and this changes. So it's all about figuring out that process.
And any advice for other authors or writers who are trying to break through right now? They've made something, but they're trying to break through in terms of submitting stories or get their stories looked at, bought, read, anything like that. Do you have any advice for them in terms of the most important thing that you see people making the same mistake over and over? And, or, what is the biggest lesson that they can learn from your experience?
Yeah, I think the key thing is if you're thinking of becoming a writer, don't do it. Run. It's fucking hard. You got to be like a masochist. I think of myself sometimes in a lot of ways that maybe I'm a masochist. Maybe I just like all this torment, all this rejection.
Yeah.
But it's just, you're like that as a musician, right? That's art for you. It's just hard finding that road. But to answer your question, honestly, I think be ready to write a lot, read a lot. Like Stephen King says, read a lot and write a lot. You really have to find the time to get your butt in the chair and just fight through the blocks. You can use a book like The Art of War to help you overcome some of that stuff. Um, you have to be willing to not go to that party and, not go to dinner and like get a routine to where you can write on a consistent basis. Because trust me, there are days, even though I have a sort of routine in place, there are days that I sit down and I don't have that fire in me, or that nagging self doubt is, calling me a loser all day. And sometimes I listen to that voice, but I'm there in the chair anyway. But you have to show up, and you have to keep working through those moments, even when you don't feel like the muse is there. Um, on those days, maybe you can edit a piece. When you're not feeling like writing something original, you can edit or send out submissions. But get you a routine, because if you don't, you're never going to have the time to do it. You have to make the time.
Said and summarized as well. But I thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, and mostly for honestly having someone else that I can talk to about horror. My God,
Yes.
it's so hard, but when we do finally find each other out there in the wild, it's always a really, I don't know. I feel like we understand each other in a way that it's kind of not readily available in polite society, let's say.
Yeah, and I'm halfway through your book, and like I started reading, and I was like, oh, he's a kindred spirit. So I get this guy. I know where he's coming from.
I really appreciate you saying that. That's I don't do well with compliments, so I'm just gonna just slopey shoulder and just say thank you, and it's a pleasure reading through yours. Show Me Where It Hurts is an awesome collection of short stories that you should read, especially if you're not a fan of horror, because it is so fun, wholesome, and lighthearted. And sarcasm aside, Show Me Where It Hurts is going to show you where it hurts. I'm just going to try out different taglines with varying levels of effectiveness. No,
That's fine.
I genuinely have. I think that so many of the stories are going to stick with me. I knew right away. I was like, "Yep, that'll cycle through. That's going to return to me the imagery from this one." Um, it's it's great stuff, and yeah, I can't thank you enough for sharing the time with me and your insights on this. And I would wish you luck, but I don't think you need it, man. You've already had a short run of book tours in support of it, and I will keep an eye on you closely for anything further. Do you have like a newsletter or something that you have, or something like that, where I can sort of catch up and keep up to date on you?
Yeah, I invite people to find my website. It's robertestahl.com, and you can sign up for news alerts, although I haven't started doing those yet. But please give me your email address because I hope to have that going in the next year or so. But also, I'm on socials. I'm
Amazing.
on Facebook and I'm on Instagram also, and I love connecting with new people. And send me questions about writing, or let's talk about some of the stories you read. I'm pretty social, so.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Robert. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to the next piece of writing that you got coming for us.
Well, thanks, Lance. It's been a treat. I appreciate your time this morning.